My name is Ariana Blake, and at 35 years old I had learned one hard truth over and over again. No matter how good I was, some people looked at me and saw a burden. But nothing prepared me for the day my boss, Captain Stephen Hayes, looked straight into my eyes and told me words that shook deep into my bones. I remember standing inside the training hangar, the smell of jet fuel still clinging to my uniform. My hands were steady the way they always were when I flew. I was the top-rated senior pilot in my division, finishing every evaluation with scores most pilots only dreamed of. Everyone knew it. Even Stephen knew it. But that day he folded his arms, sighed, and said the sentence that would replay in my mind for days. "A man cannot be a chief pilot, Ariana." Froze. First I thought he misspoke. He didn't. "No matter how good you are," he continued, "men around you have always treated you as a burden. Passengers want to feel safe, and they don't want a man in that role." I blinked. You mean woman, don't you? They don't want a woman in that role." He shook his head. "No, I said what I meant. A chief pilot must be gentle, organized, calm. Men don't give people that feeling anymore. They cause trouble. Men don't comfort passengers. Women do. That's why you can't move any higher, Ariana. You're too intimidating." Intimidating? Me? I just stood there, my throat tight and my hands cold. He dismissed me like I was an item on his desk. After that day, one thing became clear to me. If the aviation world wanted to believe I was not soft enough or gentle enough, then I would show them something entirely different. I would prove that I could be much more than any title, any box they put me in, and any label they tried to glue to my name. But I had no idea that my decision would lead to an event so shocking that the whole country would soon be talking about it. An event that would change my life, and the lives of everyone involved, forever. And it started on a cloudy Tuesday morning when I stepped onto Flight 782. Unaware of what waited for me inside. Before I tell you what happened on that flight, before the moment when everything exploded into chaos and the truth about who I really was finally showed itself, let me ask you, where are you watching from? The United States? Canada? Me no. 'Cause this story starts with people just like you. Ordinary people. People who boarded a plane expecting nothing unusual. People who trusted us, the pilots, to keep them safe. Let me introduce them properly. There was Captain Marcus Reed, my co-pilot, a calm but overly curious man whose eyebrows always moved more than his mouth. There was Grace, the lead flight attendant, sweet and full of jokes that only she laughed at. There was Mrs. Morton, an elderly woman who flew every month to visit her grandchild in Seattle. She always brought cookies. And there was Ben, a teenage boy traveling alone for the very first time, clutching his backpack like it was the only friend he had. They didn't know me yet, not fully. They didn't know the storm building inside me after Stephen's words. And they definitely didn't know the storm waiting for us in the sky. Before the main event, life was calm. Or at least it looked calm from the outside. I grew up in Detroit, in a small apartment above a grocery store. My mom worked 2 jobs, my dad left before I turned 10, and my brothers treated me like their shadow. I learned early to rely on myself. Kindness and empathy were not just things I liked, they were survival tools. I treated people with respect because I knew what it felt like to be ignored or underestimated. My passion for flying started the day I watched a jet pass so close overhead that the windows shook. I was 9. Mom yelled at me for standing on the roof, but I told her, "One day I'll fly one of those." She didn't stop me from dreaming. Over the years I worked every job you could think of, waitress, babysitter, cleaner, until I saved enough money for flying school. Every instructor I met told me I had a gift. My hands were steady, my instincts sharp. Flying made sense to me the way breathing made sense to everyone else. By the time I turned 30, I had flown international routes, emergency medical flights, and even assisted in rescue missions. I had seen people cry, panic, celebrate, get sick, and get engaged on flights. Humans were complicated, but flying was simple. Too simple. Until that Tuesday morning. But before that, something smaller happened. A less extreme event. A moment that showed me just how unpredictable life could be. It was the morning of Flight 782. I had arrived early as always. I walked through the terminal, waved at a few gate agents, and checked the weather reports. Everything seemed normal. Then I noticed a man sitting alone at the far end of the gate. Nervous, sweating. His hands trembled like he had run a marathon. He had no luggage, not even a small bag. That struck me as strange. He looked up at me once, then quickly looked away. I didn't know why, but something about him made my stomach twist. Not in fear, but in curiosity. I walked closer to check on him, but before I could speak to him, Grace, the flight attendant, called me from the jet bridge. "Ariana, could you come help with something real quick?" By the time I turned back, the man had disappeared. I didn't know it then, but that man was going to change everything. We boarded the plane. Passengers settled into their seats. Grace gave her safety smiles. Captain Marcus made a joke that only half the plane understood. And I sat in the cockpit, going through the controls as calmly as ever. But just as I was about to call for final checks, something happened. Something that would become the first extreme event of our story. It started with a sound, small, quick, sharp, coming from the cabin. Scream. Not a normal scream. A scream filled with panic. Followed by shouts. Followed by running. Followed by the unmistakable sound of someone banging on the cockpit door. I turned to Marcus, who froze in place, staring at the locked door as the banging grew louder. "Ariana," he whispered, his face turning pale. "Something's wrong out there." I unbuckled my seatbelt slowly, listening to the chaos growing on the other side of the door. And then a voice, shaking, desperate but eerily familiar, yelled from the other side. "Open the door. We don't have time. Someone has." The person didn't finish the sentence. A loud crash cut them off. And the cockpit door fell silent. That was the moment everything changed. And that, for a long second, Marcus and I just sat there in the cockpit, staring at the door like it might start speaking to us. The silence outside was heavier than the scream that came before it. Silence like that doesn't happen on a plane. Not with 164 passengers. Not with flight attendants moving up and down the aisles. Not with kids kicking seats or babies crying or someone asking for water every 10 minutes. But this silence felt wrong. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering in my neck. My mind replayed the muffled warning from the other side of the door. "Open the door. We don't have time. Someone has." Then the crash. Then nothing. Marcus's hands trembled as he reached for the intercom. Should we call the cabin?" he whispered. "No," I placed my hand over his. "If something dangerous is happening out there, opening communication might give us away. We stay quiet." The truth was, I didn't want to admit I was scared. Pilots don't get scared. At least that's what everyone believes. But right then, fear curled inside me like a cold fist. And still, something in my gut told me this wasn't random. Something or someone was wrong on this plane. I pulled my headset off and stood slowly, listening for any movement outside the cockpit door. Nothing. Not a cough. Not a whisper. Not even a footstep. Marcus finally broke the silence. "Ariana, do you think it's that man you mentioned? The one with no luggage?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. But my instincts were screaming louder than words ever could. And then, like the moment snapped in half, noise exploded in the cabin again. Voices, running, baby crying, someone shouting for help, a loud metallic clatter, and Grace's voice, high, shaking, terrified, calling out, "Everyone stay seated, please." My heart jumped. Grace never panicked. If she sounded scared, something serious was happening. But I couldn't leave the cockpit. Not yet. Pilots don't abandon their post unless the situation outside is clearer. If we opened the door into danger, we risked losing control of the plane altogether. Just then the cabin phone rang. One sharp, shrill ring that made both of us jump. Marcus stared at it like it was a bomb. "Should we?" he whispered. "We have to," I said, lifting the receiver with a slow hand. "Grace, is that you?" Her voice came through in broken breaths. Ariana, something's wrong. Something is very, very wrong. You need to. A loud thump interrupted her. Something or someone grabbed the phone from her hand. I heard a scuffle, yell, then a chilling sound, the line going dead. I lowered the phone. Marcus stared at me, waiting for answers I didn't have. What now? He whispered. What now? We had no idea the real nightmare hadn't even started. Before we could speak, the plane jolted. Just a tiny shake, but enough to send a ripple of fear down my spine. Not turbulence. Not wind. This was different. Something hit the outside of the aircraft. And when it hit again, harder this time, I felt it deep in my bones. What was that? Marcus gasped. I didn't know. But I stepped back to my seat and scanned the monitors. No engine failure. No pressure drops. No alarms. Everything inside the cockpit said the plane was fine. But everything happening outside said otherwise. We need eyes, I said. I'm going to check the feed. I hit a button to pull up the internal security camera. Something only pilots had access to. The screen flickered once. Then came to life. Marcus and I leaned in at the same time. And what we saw changed everything. People were standing in the aisles, looking confused and afraid. Grace was on the floor, holding her arm like it hurt. A few passengers were gathered around a seat in the middle of the cabin. At first, I didn't understand what they were staring at. Then the camera angle shifted and I saw him. The man from the gate. The man with no luggage. He was sitting completely still, his back straight, his hands on his knees. And his eyes were locked directly into the security camera lens. He stared at us. Not around him. Not at the passengers yelling. Us. Like he knew exactly where the camera was. Like he wanted us to see him. And then, slowly, deliberately, he lifted his right hand. There was something in it. Something metallic. Something that made my stomach twist into a knot. Before we could zoom in, the feed cut out. Static. Then black. Marcus stumbled backward. Ariana, he was holding something. Something sharp. I nodded silently. He knows we're watching. I nodded again. Then what do we do? He whispered. I opened my mouth to answer. But I didn't get the chance. Because at that exact moment, something hit the cockpit door from the outside. Hard. The whole door shook like someone rammed it with their shoulder. Marcus dropped into his seat, panic taking over. Another hit. And another. The banging grew louder, angrier, stronger. Whoever was on the other side wasn't knocking. They were trying to break in. I stood in front of the door, my hand resting on the emergency latch, but not opening it. Never opening it. Not without knowing what waited for us out there. Stay back, I whispered. Marcus stared at me in terror. Ariana, if they get in here. They won't. I swallowed. They can't. But I wasn't sure. Not anymore. Another slam hit the door. Then the person outside spoke. And his voice was the same shaky, trembling voice I had heard earlier at the gate. The same man we'd watched on the camera. Ariana, he called softly, almost calmly. Open the door. We need to talk. He knew my name. He knew who I was. I looked at Marcus. He shook his head violently. We're not opening that, he whispered. I took a small step back, my mind racing. Why did he know my name? Why was he on this flight? Why did the feed show him staring straight into the camera, holding something metallic? Why was he suddenly calm now? Come. Ariana, he repeated. If you don't open the door, more people will get hurt. My heart stopped. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't shouting. He was warning. And that was somehow more terrifying. Before I could respond, a scream ripped through the cabin, louder than any we'd heard before. Child's scream. Terrified. Full of real danger. Froze. Marcus whispered. Ariana, something's happening out there. Something bad. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Because the next moment, through the thin crack under the cockpit door, something slid into view. Shadow. Movement. Drop. A small pool of something dark spreading slowly across the floor. My breath caught. Marcus covered his mouth. The man's voice returned, firmer now. Ariana, this is your last chance. Open the door. Before it's too late. The banging stopped. The cabin went silent again. And I stood there, staring at the thin pool of liquid under the door, not knowing if it was water, or something far worse. And that, for several seconds I stood frozen, staring at the thin, dark pool on the floor. It slid slowly under the cockpit door, forming a tiny river that crept toward my boots. My breath turned shallow. My heart thudded so loud it echoed in my ears. Marcus was shaking his head like he could undo what we were seeing. Ariana, is that blood? I didn't answer. I didn't want to, because if I said yes out loud it would become real. And once it was real, everything changed. There was no training manual for this. No safety briefing. No procedure. Nothing prepares you for a moment when you realize danger is inches away. Not on the radar, not from the weather, not from a machine, but from a human. I forced myself to breathe slowly and knelt down to look closer at the dark pool. It was thick. Too thick to be spilled juice. Too dark to be water. Too heavy to be anything simple. Marcus backed away until his chair caught him behind the knees. He dropped into it, whispering over and over, "This can't be happening. This can't be happening." The knocking stopped. The screaming stopped. The man's voice stopped. Silence again. A dangerous silence. A silence that felt like the whole plane was holding its breath. Then, without warning, something lightly tapped the other side of the cockpit door. Not a slam. Not a pound. Soft tap. Like someone knocking politely. My skin prickled. And then, "Ariana," the man called again. His voice calm but unervingly close. I swallowed hard. "What do you want?" There was a short pause, as if he were thinking about the right answer. Then, "I want to help." Marcus nearly barked out a laugh. One of those scared, broken laughs that happens when a person reaches the end of their fear. "Help," he yelled. "You're scaring the whole plane. Someone is screaming. There's something on the floor. You banged on the door so hard you bent the frame. And now you want to help." The man didn't reply immediately. When he did speak, he sounded tired. Heavy. "You're pilots," he said. "You've been trained for a lot of things. But you have not been trained for what's happening out here." My heartbeat stuttered. What exactly is happening out there? Another pause. Longer this time. Then he whispered, almost like a confession. "Someone is not who they say they are." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, a loud crash echoed through the cabin. Metal hitting metal. Followed by screams, footsteps, a shout for help, and something slamming against the floor. The plane shook slightly from the impact. Marcus jumped up. "We can't stay in here forever." "We're not opening that door," I said firmly. "We might not have a choice." The cabin phone rang again, making both of us jump. I snatched the receiver so fast I nearly dropped it. It wasn't Grace's voice this time. It was a child. A small, trembling voice. "Help, please." Froze. "Sweetheart. Who is this?" "My name is Ben," the voice whimpered. "I'm scared. Something's wrong with one of the passengers. They're hurting people." The teenage boy traveling alone. I felt my throat close. "Ben, listen to me. I need you to stay calm. Where are you? Are you safe?" "No," he said quickly. He told everyone to sit still. And he's holding something. And the boy gasped. Not a normal gasp. Terrified gasp. "Ariana," he whispered. "He's coming this way." The line cut. "Ben! Ben!" I shouted, but the phone was dead. Marcus slammed his headset onto the console. "We have to do something." I took a deep breath. "We will. But we can't run out there blind. We need information." My hands moved on their own, pulling up the secondary camera feed. One the passengers didn't know about, placed high above row 12. I waited for the screen to load. Static. White lines. The cabin appeared. But not like before. People were huddled together, holding each other. Some were crying. Others were staring straight ahead, too scared to move. Grace wasn't visible. My stomach twisted. And then the camera shifted slightly. The man in the middle aisle, the one with no luggage, was walking slowly toward the front of the plane. His steps were calm. Calm. He still held the metallic object in his hand, though the camera couldn't catch the full shape of it. Passengers moved away from him like he was a disease. My heart pounded as he stepped under the camera, his face inches from the lens. He stopped walking, slowly looked up, and stared into the camera again, straight at us. Marcus stepped back until he hit the wall. The man raised his hand, the one with the metallic object, and for the first time, we saw it clearly. Not a weapon, at least not a normal one. It looked like a long, sharp medical tool, a scalpel. My breath hitched. But that wasn't the most shocking thing. The shocking part was the blood on it. The camera glitched again. Then the feed cut to black. I slammed my hand on the console. "Not now," Marcus whispered. "We're going to die." "No," I snapped. "Not on my watch. I don't think we're the ones in control anymore," he said shakily. I didn't respond. My mind was spinning. Why did that man have a scalpel? Why did he have blood on it? Why was he calm while everyone else panicked? Why did he keep staring at the cameras? And most of all, why did he know my name? I scanned the cockpit for anything I could use. Emergency restraints, hand radios, flashlights, anything that could work in a confrontation if we needed it. Before I could decide what to do, the cockpit received a coded alert from the cabin sensors. The plane had shifted weight. Someone or multiple people had moved suddenly. "Something's happening again," I whispered. I moved to the cockpit door and pressed my ear against it, listening. Muffled voices. A man shouting. A woman crying. Something heavy being dragged across the floor. Marcus looked like he might pass out. What if he hurts more people because we're locked in here? What if we get killed if we open this door? Shot back. We can't help anyone if we're dead. He rubbed his face with both hands. So what do we do? I didn't know. I truly didn't know. But before I could think of an answer, something happened that froze the blood in my veins. Through the small gap at the bottom of the cockpit door, piece of paper slid in. A torn piece of a flight safety card. With handwriting across the front. Large. Cheeky. Written in black marker. I picked it up with trembling fingers. Marcus leaned over my shoulder to read it. The note said, "Do not trust him. The man with the scalpel is not the threat. There is someone else." My heartbeat went wild. Someone else. Someone worse than the man with the scalpel. Marcus whispered. "Who wrote that?" I turned the card over, hoping for a name, a clue, anything. Nothing. Just the torn edge. Another scream erupted in the cabin. Louder, closer. Followed by footsteps pounding toward the front of the plane. Fast. Too fast. Marcus backed away again. "Ariana. I hear it." The footsteps grew louder, racing up the aisle. Boom. Closer. Closer. Coming straight for the cockpit door. I braced myself. Marcus covered his ears. And just as the footsteps reached the front, something slammed into the cockpit door so hard it shook the entire panel. I staggered backward. Marcus fell into his seat. Another slam. Then another. A voice screamed from the other side, desperate and breathless. "Let me in. Please." "He's right behind me." I stepped forward. Hand on the emergency latch. Mind racing. Do I open it? Do I risk it? Do I trust the voice? Do I trust the note? Do I trust anything at all? Marcus grabbed my arm. "Ariana, wait." But the screaming outside grew louder. More terrified. More urgent. And then the person outside shouted words that made my entire body freeze. Words that changed everything we thought we knew. Words that pushed us straight into the next extreme event. "Ariana, it's Grace. He's going to kill me if you don't open the door." Gasp. Marcus shouted. Grace! Another slam. Harder. More desperate. Open the door. I moved toward the latch. My hand shaking. My heart breaking. Knowing that whatever decision I made could save a life. Or end one. And that. For a split second, my hand froze on the emergency latch. My whole body felt caught in a tight, burning knot. Grace's voice, shaking, breathless, terrified, kept echoing through the metal door. Please, Ariana. Open it. He's right behind me. Marcus was pacing in frantic circles, his hands on his head, muttering to himself. This is bad, this is bad, this is so bad. And then, another crash slammed into the cockpit door. Harder. Closer. Like someone had been thrown against it. Grace screamed again, a raw, heart-splitting sound. He has a weapon. Ariana, open. Her voice cut off. Then silence. No breathing. No footsteps. No struggle. Nothing. Just the hum of the cockpit generators. I felt like the air had turned to ice water. My fingers curled into fists as I leaned closer to the door, listening. Grace. I whispered. Nothing. Grace. I said again, louder. Still nothing. Marcus stopped pacing and stared at the door, waiting for any sign. Ariana, she's not talking anymore. I know. Why isn't she talking anymore? I didn't answer because I didn't want to speak the fear sitting heavy in my chest. The cockpit phone rang, one sharp, cold ring. Both of us jumped. I grabbed the receiver with trembling fingers. Grace. But it wasn't Grace. It was a man's voice. Whoa. Calculating. You almost made a very big mistake, Captain Blake, he said. The blood in my veins froze. Because it wasn't the voice of the man with the scalpel. This voice belonged to someone else. Someone older. Someone colder. Someone dangerous. I straightened. Who is this? He chuckled softly. You don't know me yet. But I know you. The words felt like teeth scraping against my spine. I swallowed. Where's Grace? You'll see her soon, he said simply. That is, if you make the right choices. Marcus stumbled backward, staring at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He has Grace. That's the someone else. The real threat. I raised my hand for him to be quiet. The man continued. Everything happening right now is happening for a reason. You're involved now, Ariana. And you're going to listen. Clenched my jaw. No. I don't take orders from people who scare my passengers. You will, he said, because not listening will get people killed. Put Grace on the phone. No. Put her on. He chuckled again, this time slower. You're brave. I see why they said you were the best pilot in your division. I stopped breathing. How did he know that? Who are you? I whispered. Someone who has been waiting for a very long time, he replied. And it seems I'm not the only one. Before I could ask what he meant, the line clicked. He hung up. I stared at the phone, stunned, terrified, angry, confused. Every emotion twisting inside me like a storm. My hands were shaking around the receiver. My throat hurt. Marcus moved closer and whispered, Ariana, there are 2 of them. I shook my head. No, there might be more. He paled instantly. You think there's more? There's a note saying the man with the scalpel isn't the threat, I said quietly. That means someone else is the real mastermind. And the voice on the phone isn't the scalpel man. Their voices are totally different. Marcus slumped into his seat. We're trapped. No, I whispered. We're not. I refused to believe that. I couldn't afford to. Not with 164 souls behind my door. I moved back to the console and tried to pull up the cabin feed again. Static. White lines. Then nothing. I tried a different camera. Nothing. The system wasn't broken. Someone had disabled it. We were flying blind. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to think clearly. We need to get into the cabin. Marcus shot up as if I'd slapped him. No. Ariana, we can't open that door. If we stay in here, the passengers die, I snapped. If we leave this cockpit, we die. I stared at him, breathing hard. He wasn't wrong. But neither was I. We needed a plan. Smart one. Safe one. Before I could form one, something clicked against the cockpit door. A soft metallic clink. Then another. Then a faint scrape. My throat tightened. Someone was picking the lock. Marcus backed away as far as he could. No, 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 Ariana, what do we do? I moved quietly to the emergency equipment drawer, opened it, and grabbed the heavy metal flashlight. It wasn't much, but it was something. The lock continued clicking. Softly, calmly, patiently. Whoever was doing it wasn't panicking or rushing. They knew exactly what they were doing. I motioned for Marcus to stay quiet. After a few more clicks, the movement stopped. Silence. A slow, creeping knock on the cockpit door. 3 taps. Deliberate. Haunting. Marcus whispered. Ariana. I held up a hand. Then a voice spoke through the door. Quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that carries danger inside it. Ariana, the man whispered. You should not have ignored me. My heart dropped. Not the scalpel man. Not the boy. Not any passenger I recognized. It was the same older voice from the phone. He was at our door. He was picking the lock. He was inches away. Then the doorknob moved. Just a tiny twist. Enough to tell us someone was on the other side, holding it. Marcus choked on a breath. He got through the first lock. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I leaned closer to the door, gripping the flashlight tight. The man whispered again, this time with a hint of amusement. Open the door, Ariana. I whispered back, no. There was a long, chilling pause. Then I'll open it for you. The doorknob twisted harder. Click. The first lock gave way. Marcus screamed. He's coming, Ian. I shoved the manual lock bar down, the last barrier between us and him. He stopped turning the handle. And he laughed softly. You can't hide forever, Captain Blake. His footsteps slowly faded away, moving back toward the cabin. I didn't relax. Neither did Marcus. Because something about that laugh. Something about the calm way he walked away. Something about the fact that he didn't need the cockpit right now. Made the air colder than the Arctic outside our windows. Marcus swallowed hard. He'll be back. I know. What if he brings the man with the scalpel? I sighed shakily. Then we're running out of time. Before we could think further, the aircraft sensors pinged again. Cabin weight shift. Rapid movement. And then, a scream tore through the intercom system. The plane's built-in emergency channel. A scream filled with pure terror. Followed by a man yelling. Then more screaming. Then someone shouting. He took her. He took Grace toward the back of the plane. Marcus grabbed the wall. Oh God! Ariana! He's moving her. I moved to the cabin feed again, still dead. Nothing. No camera. No sight. Just voices. Screams. Kiss. I took a deep, steadying breath. If they took Grace, they were planning something. Something big. Something dangerous. Something we couldn't wait to react to. I turned to Marcus. He looked up at me, pale, terrified. Ariana, he whispered. What do we do? I tightened my grip on the metal flashlight. We go out there. Marcus's mouth dropped. Are you insane? We don't have a choice, I said firmly. Grace is in danger. Ben is in danger. Everyone is in danger. And if that man gets control of the cabin, he'll have access to the emergency exits. The oxygen overrides everything. You want to open the door with a killer outside? I want to save my passengers. I walked toward the cockpit door. Marcus grabbed my arm. Ariana, if we open that door, we're stepping into a nightmare. I looked at him, really looked at him. We're already in one. Before he could argue again, a new sound filled the cabin speakers. A man screaming. Loud thud. A metallic clang. Then a terrified voice shouting. He has Grace. He's using her as bait. Don't open the voice cut off. Marcus nearly fainted. I pressed my forehead against the cool metal of the door. And right then, Right in that moment, plane dropped. Sudden violent dip. Like something hit the underside. Marcus screamed. I grabbed the controls instinctively. The plane steadied after a moment, but the shockwave sent panic roaring through the cabin. I could hear people crying, shouting, running. And over all of it, faint voice through the door. Grace's voice. Crying. Whispering. Ariana, help me. My heart shattered. The latch under my hand trembled. Marcus looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. Ariana, don't do it. But I already knew my next move. I lifted the latch. Slowly, quietly. Ready to face whatever waited outside. Whether it was the scalpel man, the older man, or someone else entirely. And as the door clicked, as the lock slid open, an enormous shadow moved on the other side. Something or someone was waiting for us. And that. The room spun with noise as alarms rang, screens flashed, and voices overlapped in panic. I stood in the middle of all of it, watching the red signal of Flight 378 blink on and off like a heartbeat that was slowly fading. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had spent years learning how to breathe through fear, even when people didn't believe in me. Move, move, move. The tall man shouted as people stretched wires, pulled up maps and connected radios. But amidst the chaos, Stephen walked straight up to me. His face was stiff, his jaw tight. You need to leave, he said quietly but firmly. This isn't your world. You will only make things worse. I swallowed hard. I'm not here for you, I said. I'm here for the people on that plane. For the first time he didn't respond. He just stared at me like he was seeing something he didn't like. Something that scared him. Maybe it was my courage. Maybe it was the possibility that I might finally prove him wrong. A low rumble came from a speaker. Someone shouted, "We're getting something." A signal. Everyone rushed toward the main screen. The signal was broken and full of static, but we could hear it. A pilot's voice struggling to stay steady. Mayday. Mayday. This is Flight 378. We have lost. Engines, left wing, fire, requesting immediate. The message cut off. The room fell silent. A woman whispered, "Oh no." Another covered her mouth. Someone else whispered, "Are they going down?" My heart beat painfully, but I stepped closer to the screen. "Can I see the last 30 seconds of the telemetry?" Yes. Stephen opened his mouth to protest, but the tall man raised a hand to silence him. "Give it to him," the man said. For the first time ever, someone chose to trust me over Stephen. A technician pulled up the data. I leaned in, eyes scanning the numbers and graphs. Something didn't look right. The patterns weren't matching a normal engine failure. The altitude change wasn't normal either. Then I saw it. Dip. Twist. Pressure spike. A type of movement I had only seen once. In a simulation no one believed I could master. "It's not just an engine failure," I said. "The plane is stuck in a partial roll. If they try to climb, they'll stall. If they descend too fast, they'll flip. They need to stabilize the right side, fast, or the whole aircraft will spin." Everyone stared at me. The tall man asked, "You're sure?" "Yes. If they try a normal emergency procedure, it will make things worse." Stephen scoffed. "You can't possibly know that." But the tall man ignored him. "What should they do instead?" I took a deep breath. "They need to angle the right aileron down and reduce thrust slowly, not fast. If they do it too quickly, the wing might tear. They also need to shift weight by asking passengers on the right side to move to the middle. It's risky, but it will stop the roll." The room stayed silent. Then the tall man nodded. "Send the instructions." Before anyone could move, the woman with glasses said, "Sir, we can't. The radio connection is gone again." A heavy silence dropped over the room. I felt my stomach twist. All that information, everything I just figured out, meant nothing if we couldn't reach them. The tall man spoke slowly. "Try again." The technician shook his head. "There's nothing to try. They're too far. The signal is gone." Stephen exhaled in relief, like the problem had solved itself simply because I couldn't help. "It's unfortunate," he said. "But nothing can be done now. Let's move on. We need real pilots." I turned sharply toward him. "They're still alive. Don't talk like they're not." But Stephen just raised his eyebrow and smirked. It was then that the tall man's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, frowned, then stepped away to answer. He spoke for a few seconds, his eyes growing wider and wider. When he returned, his face was white. "We just got word," he said quietly. "Flight 378 has been spotted by a cargo vessel near the Atlantic corridor. It's losing altitude fast. They say it's..." A sudden crash shook the entire building. The lights flickered. Screams echoed down the hallway. Glass shattered somewhere behind us. People dove under tables. The tall man yelled, "Everyone down!" Froze. Because the sound wasn't an earthquake. It wasn't thunder. It was the unmistakable roar of something huge moving too fast. Something falling. Something coming straight toward us. And before I could even blink, a massive shadow crossed the windows. The ceiling lights exploded. And the building shook again. Harder this time. Something was hitting us. Something big. Something from the sky. The second impact hit like a hammer. The floor lurched, and I stumbled forward, crashing into a table. Papers flew everywhere. People screamed as alarms blared and red lights flashed across the ceiling. Someone shouted, "What is that? What is hitting us?" But no one had an answer. The tall man grabbed the edge of the conference table to steady himself. "Everyone stay low. Move away from the windows." The entire building groaned, like metal being twisted by giant hands. I crawled toward the nearest pillar, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. My palms scraped against the rough carpet, but I didn't stop. I kept moving, forcing my body to stay low. Another crash. This one smaller but close. A window shattered behind me, sending sharp glass across the floor like tiny wings. I covered my head as pieces rained down, the sound rattling through my bones. Stephen crouched not far from me. His face was pale. For the first time since I had known him, he looked afraid. The woman with the glasses crawled toward the main control desk. "Check the roof," she yelled at the technician near her. "What's hitting us?" The technician frantically typed on his keyboard. I'm trying. The external cameras are down." The tall man's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to evacuate this floor now. Move toward the interior stairwell. Keep low and keep moving." People began crawling toward the hallway, some shaking, some crying, others frozen in fear. The air smelled like dust and burning wires. I forced myself to breathe slow. I had been in scary situations before, but never like this. Not in a giant building. Not with the sky attacking us. When the shaking paused for a moment, I grabbed the edge of a desk and pulled myself up on my knees. "Do you think it's the plane?" I asked the woman with glasses. She shook her head fast. "It can't be. The plane is miles away from land. It must be debris, or something broke off." Before she could finish, a deep groaning sound echoed from above. Like metal bending. Like weight pressing down. Like something very large sliding across the roof. Everyone froze. Stephen whispered, "What is that?" The tall man ordered again, louder this time. "Move, all of you. Now." People began rushing, crawling, sliding, scrambling across the floor. I helped a woman who couldn't stand because her ankle was hurt. She leaned on me heavily as we moved toward the hallway. Then, from above us, came the loudest sound yet. A ripping, tearing, like the sky itself was being peeled open. Dust fell from the ceiling. Lights burst. Someone screamed, "The roof! The roof is coming down!" I grabbed the injured woman and shielded her with my body as a large metal panel snapped loose and slammed to the floor, sending dust and sparks everywhere. The building shook again, this time harder. "Go! Oh, go!" the tall man yelled. As we crawled into the hallway, the technician behind us shouted, I got a camera feedback. Wait. His words stopped, cut off by something so horrifying his voice simply died. We all turned. What do you see? The tall man shouted. The technician's hands trembled on the keyboard. His eyes widened. He whispered, barely audible. It's not debris. Everyone held their breath. The technician swallowed. It's a piece of the plane's engine. A loud crack split the ceiling open above him. He looked up. I looked up. A giant shadow fell. A metal beam snapped loose. And before anyone could scream, the entire ceiling above the technician collapsed. The floor shook. Dust shot up like smoke. Screams filled the hallway. I reached out in instinct, choking on dust. Hey, are you okay? But the spot where the technician had been sitting was covered in twisted metal. Silence froze the room. Someone cried softly. Stephen whispered, "We need to get out of here before the entire building comes down." The tall man nodded but didn't look away from the ruins. His voice cracked for the first time that day. "Everyone follow the lights. Head for the emergency stairs now. Move." We scrambled down the dark hallway, coughing, blinking through dust, trying to stay calm, but fear clung to us like glue. Then, just as we reached the stairwell door, a sound echoed above us. A deep, rumbling groan, like the entire roof was sagging, bending, giving in. Stephen looked up. The tall man looked up. I looked up. And right there, directly above us, a massive crack ripped open across the ceiling, spilling daylight and metal dust onto our faces. The entire roof was beginning to cave in, right above the only exit. And that is where we stop. The crack in the ceiling spread like a lightning bolt, fast, jagged, alive. Tiny bits of plaster rained down on us. The metal above groaned again, louder this time, like a warning. The hallway lights flickered, then went completely dark except for a dim red strip glowing along the floor. The tall man pressed his hand against the stairwell door. "Everyone stay calm. We'll get through." A loud pop shook the air. The ceiling dipped. We all froze. "Back up," the woman with glasses shouted. "It's going to fall." But backing up wasn't easy. The hallway behind us was filled with smoke and debris from the earlier crash. The only way out was forward, through the stairwell door that now had a crack forming right above it. The injured woman beside me clutched my arm. "Please don't let me get trapped here." "I won't," I said, even though fear squeezed my chest tight. Stephen stepped closer to the tall man. His voice trembled. "Just open the door. We can make it through before it collapses." But the tall man shook his head. "If we push the door too hard, the pressure might bring the ceiling down instantly." Another groan echoed above us. The metal support beam bent even more. Dust filled the air. Someone whispered a prayer behind me. I felt sweat slide down my forehead. My hands shook as I looked at the ceiling, then at the terrified people behind me. I didn't know what to do, but something inside me refused to freeze. "We need something to support the ceiling," I said. "Anything. Desk. Beam. Something strong enough to hold it while we open the door." The woman with glasses nodded immediately. Yes, that could work." But Stephen's voice cut in bitter and sharp. "It won't work. He's guessing. We follow him and we die." I glared at him. "It's better than standing here doing nothing." The tall man raised a hand. "Enough. We need a plan, and we need it now." I looked around fast, scanning the hallway. Through the dust and shadows, I spotted something. An overturned maintenance cart with thick metal poles still attached to it. "There," pointed. "We can use the frame." Without waiting for permission, I ran toward it. The floor shook again as another boom sounded overhead. The shadows vibrated. Everyone yelled for me to stop, but I didn't. I reached the cart, grabbed one of the metal poles and yanked hard. It resisted, creaking loudly. Come on. Finally, with a loud snap, the pole broke loose. I ran back with it, coughing from the dust. "Help me lift it," shouted. Two men rushed forward. Together, we raised the metal bar and wedged it under the sagging part of the ceiling. The metal squealed under the weight, but it held, at least for the moment. The tall man nodded. Good. Now open the door, slowly. Stephen hesitated, but this time he didn't argue. He grabbed the handle and pulled gently. A piece of the ceiling cracked above him. Stop! He yelled. He froze. The bar trembled, bending slightly. We need one more support, I said. Or this won't hold. The woman with glasses darted toward a broken metal shelf in the corner. She kicked it twice until a shorter bar came loose, then ran back, sliding it under another weak point in the ceiling. For a moment, the hallway became silent. No crashing, no groaning, no falling debris, just stillness. Open it, the tall man said. Stephen swallowed hard and pulled the stairwell door again. This time it opened slowly, carefully, quietly. Cool air poured out like a breath of relief. Gee-oh, the tall man shouted. Everyone down the stairs. People rushed through. I led the injured woman through first, making sure she didn't fall. The others followed, one by one, breathing hard, shaking, whispering thanks. We were halfway into the stairwell when we heard it. A sharp crack. The metal beam above the hallway snapped. The bar bent. The ceiling sagged lower. The tall man shouted, "Move! Move now!" Everyone ran down the steps. I pushed the injured woman ahead, urging her faster. Behind us, Stephen was just about to enter the stairwell when a glowing shower of sparks burst from the hallway. He froze. Then he screamed, "The ceiling is falling!" Turned back, and saw it happen in slow motion. The entire hallway ceiling, the metal beams, plaster, lights, all of it, ripped free and came crashing down toward us with a roar that shook the entire stairwell. Stephen stood directly under it. The tall man reached for him. People shouted. The woman with glasses screamed. And the massive chunk of the collapsing roof dropped straight toward Stephen's head. And that is where we end this part, right at the extreme event needed to close the chapter segment. The ceiling came down with a roar so loud it swallowed every scream, every breath, every thought. Dust exploded into the stairwell like a storm cloud. The force of the collapse slammed into us, pushing everyone down the steps. I grabbed the railing with one hand and pulled the injured woman close with the other as chunks of plaster and metal thundered behind us. For a moment, I thought Stephen was gone, buried under the weight of the building. But then, a sound cut through the dust. A groan. We trained. Live. Help! Someone shouted from the stairwell landing. He's stuck. The tall man rushed back up 2 steps, coughing and shielding his face. I followed, forcing my legs to move even though every instinct screamed at me to run in the opposite direction. When the dust settled enough to see, we found Stephen lying half under a fallen beam. His legs were pinned beneath heavy rubble. His forehead was bleeding and his breathing was rough, but his eyes were open, wide with fear. He saw me first. His voice cracked. "Don't just stand there, help me." The tall man tried lifting the beam. "It's too heavy. We need leverage." The smoke alarm above us screeched, filling the stairwell with sharp, endless beeping. I scanned the rubble until I spotted a long metal pipe that had fallen through the broken ceiling. I crawled toward it, grabbed it, and dragged it back. "Use this!" shouted. Together, the tall man and I wedged the pipe beneath the beam. We pressed down with everything we had. Muscles shaking, teeth clenched, sweat dripping into dust. The beam lifted an inch, then 2. The woman with glasses reached in and pulled Stephen by the shoulders. He screamed, the kind of scream that tears something inside a person, but she didn't stop. She pulled harder as we pushed harder. The beam lifted higher. Stephen slid free. The woman with glasses dragged him down the next few steps until they reached a safer landing. The tall man and I dropped the pipe and collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. For a few seconds nobody spoke. Dust floated in the stairwell like snow that didn't know where to land. Stephen coughed, then whispered, Why did you come back? You could have left me." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him I still remembered every cruel word he ever said. Another part of me remembered the injured woman leaning on me, trusting me, the people who had followed me down the stairs. The fear in Stephen's eyes when he thought he would die. So I said the only thing that felt right. Because you're still a person. And people deserve help. The woman with glasses touched my shoulder softly, like she knew the weight those words carried. The tall man stood. We're not safe yet. The building might collapse. We need to move. So we continued down the stairwell. Step after step. Floor after floor. Smoke drifted up from below now, not above. Something was burning. The air grew thicker and hotter the farther we went. On the next landing, a fire alarm light blinked urgently. Another floor down, the smell of smoke became stronger. People coughed. Some covered their mouths with sleeves. Stephen tried to stand but screamed again as pain shot through his legs. We have to carry him, the woman with glasses said. I can do it, I replied. Her brows lifted. Are you sure? He nodded. I wrapped Stephen's arm over my shoulders and lifted him slowly. He groaned in pain but didn't fight me. His weight pressed heavily against me, but I steadied myself with the railing. We descended carefully. One step. Another. Sweat dripped down my back. My shoulders ached. My arms trembled. But I kept going. Because every life mattered, not just the ones who believed in me. By the time we reached the second floor, smoke had completely filled the hallway. Flames flickered through the door window like angry orange tongues. The heat hit our faces like an open oven. We can't go through there, someone shouted. The tall man scanned the stairwell. The main exit is blocked. We need another way out. The woman with glasses pointed to a sign on the wall. There's a service exit on the south side of the building. It connects to the maintenance tunnel. But how do we reach it? A man asked. A loud cracking sound answered him. The floor above us groaned, then shifted. Dust rained down the stairwell. Everyone screamed and ducked. The tall man yelled, "Move! We're running out of time." We half ran, half stumbled toward the first floor landing. The stairwell door was jammed, swollen from the heat. I leaned Stephen against the wall and threw my shoulder into the door. Once, twice, 3 times, until it burst open with a sharp crack. Smoke poured into the stairwell. The ceiling in the lobby sagged dangerously. Chunks of plaster lay everywhere. Fire licked the walls. The exit sign on the far side blinked weakly like it was about to die. "This way," the tall man shouted. I lifted Stephen again and followed the group across the lobby. A burning piece of ceiling crashed down in front of us, sending sparks across the floor. Someone screamed. The woman with glasses grabbed the person and pulled them back just in time. We steered around the fire and reached a narrow hallway leading to the service exit. That was when we heard it. A deep rumbling, followed by a long, harsh creak. The entire building tilted, just slightly, but enough to throw everyone off balance. "Run!" the tall man shouted. "The foundation is giving out." We dashed down the hallway, stumbling, coughing, crying. Stephen gripped my shoulder tightly as I half carried, half dragged him along. The walls shook. The lights burst. An explosion sounded behind us as flames reached something electrical. The service exit door appeared ahead. Gray, metal, scratched, hope-filled. The tall man shoved it open. Cool air flooded in. Fresh air. Safe air. We heard people outside yelling for us. Emergency workers. Firefighters. The world. We were almost out. Almost safe. But then, another deep crack shook the ground. The floor beneath us split. A giant fracture tore across the hallway like a mouth opening in the earth. The ground fell several inches. People screamed. The woman with glasses slipped and grabbed the wall. The tall man reached for her. But the crack widened. Dust exploded upward. The floor dropped again. And Stephen's foot slipped right into the widening gap. He screamed, "Help me! I'm slipping." I tightened my grip. "I've got you. Don't let go." But the crack kept spreading, the floor kept sinking, and the entire building groaned like it was seconds away from total collapse. The tall man yelled, "We have to jump the gap now, all of us, or the floor will fall through." The others jumped, cleared the gap, ran outside. Only 3 of us were left on the sinking side. Me, Stephen, and the woman with glasses, who wouldn't leave without us. The crack deepened. Stephen screamed louder. I held him tighter. The woman reached for us with both hands. The building gave another violent shake. And the floor beneath us began to collapse. The floor cracked beneath us like the earth itself was opening up. Dust, debris, and sparks exploded around our feet. I felt the edge of the flooring crumble as I pressed myself against Stephen, trying to pull him back, but his weight made it nearly impossible. The woman with glasses grabbed my free hand, her grip iron-strong, and together we tried to stabilize ourselves. "Hold on. Don't let go," I shouted over the roar of breaking metal and falling debris. My heart pounded so violently it felt like it might burst out of my chest. Stephen screamed again, the sound raw and terrifying. I can't. "Yes, you can," he yelled. "You're not leaving me behind." With every ounce of strength, I dragged him backward toward the hallway wall. His legs were pinned, his hands scraping against the jagged edges of broken concrete. The crack widened faster than I could react. Sparks from electrical wires ignited small fires along the hallway walls. Smoke began to choke the air, making it hard to breathe. "Jump!" the woman with glasses shouted. I turned to her, but there was no time for hesitation. I looked at Stephen, his eyes wide with fear, and I knew we had only one chance. "On 3, I said. 1, 2, 3. I grabbed him under the arms and pulled with everything I had. The 3 of us surged forward as the floor behind us gave way completely. Dust and metal rained down into the stairwell below. The sound of cracking and crashing echoed like thunder. We hit the solid floor outside the service exit with a jolt, sliding across the concrete but alive. Coughing, covered in dust and sweat, I turned and saw the gap we had just jumped. The hallway we had been in, the floor we had barely escaped, was gone. The building moaned like a wounded giant, leaning dangerously, ready to collapse completely. Emergency lights flashed from outside. Firefighters shouted orders. Voices called for us. But through it all, Stephen's breathing was ragged, pained, but alive. The woman with glasses stood beside us, trembling but smiling faintly. I sank to the ground beside Stephen, letting my legs give out. I could feel my chest heaving. My arms ached. Every part of me ached. But we were alive. He coughed and rasped. "You saved me. I owe you." I shook my head. "No, just promise me you'll help people when you can. Don't wait for someone else to do it." The woman with glasses smiled at me. "You've got a heart that won't quit, Ariana. I've never seen anyone move like that under pressure." I looked at the wrecked building behind us. Smoke poured from the roof. Flames licked the remaining walls. Debris littered the street. People were screaming, running, and calling for help. I could see the emergency crews rushing to contain the fires. And somewhere deep inside me I felt it, the same fire that had pushed me to prove myself over the years. The fire that reminded me that no matter how many times men had told me I couldn't lead, I could. That no matter the fear, no matter the danger, I could step up. That passengers, people, and even colleagues could trust me when it mattered most. Stephen coughed again and looked at me, confusion mixed with respect in his eyes. You did all that. All by yourself." I shrugged, brushing dust from my jacket. "We did it together. You survived. That's what matters." And in that moment I realized something. Survival wasn't just about quick thinking or skill. It was about empathy. About seeing the people in front of you, not as obstacles, not as burdens, but as lives worth saving. Every step I had taken, every risk I had made was guided by that principle. The fire trucks arrived, sirens wailing, hoses spraying water over the flames. People cheered as the last survivors were brought out of the building. I helped Stephen to a waiting ambulance, then stepped back, watching the chaos slowly turn into order. It was over, or at least for now. I finally allowed myself to breathe fully. And in that moment I knew. No matter what anyone had ever said about me not being qualified, about being underestimated, or about being unfit for leadership, I had proven that courage, compassion, and determination could overcome even the most impossible odds. The world may have doubted me before, but now there was no doubt left. And yet, as I looked back at the smoldering building, a small shiver ran down my spine, because I knew that danger, in one form or another, never truly went away. But for the first time I also knew I could face it. And that was the moment everything changed. For me, for everyone who had trusted me, and for the world that had once said a man couldn't be a chief pilot. Because I had shown them all that courage, skill, and heart were not defined by gender. And in that fire, smoke, and chaos, I had become more than anyone had ever expected. The aftermath of the disaster was overwhelming. News crews flocked to the scene, helicopters hovering, flashing lights reflecting off the wet streets. Social media exploded with footage of the building collapse, the heroic rescues, and the narrow escapes. But amidst all the chaos, one name began to emerge more than any other. Ariana Blake. I stood on the edge of the emergency zone, my uniform dust-covered, my hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. Stephen was beside me now, walking with crutches, the woman with glasses following, both of them alive because of that split-second decision I had made in the stairwell. Reporters shouted questions, but I didn't answer them. I didn't need to. The people around me, the survivors, the emergency crews, the ones who had been trapped, were my answers. Their faces, pale but alive, smiling, breathing, were the proof that courage mattered more than doubt. Later, in a quiet office far from the chaos, I finally got a call from the airline's board. My old boss, Stephen, was on the line, voice tense. "Ariana, I underestimated you," he said, each word heavy. "I was wrong. I see that now. I cut him off gently. "It's not about proving you wrong. It's about proving that I could do it. And so could anyone if given the chance." There was a pause on the line, then a soft, almost vulnerable, "I understand." A few weeks later, the airline officially promoted me, not just as a chief pilot, but as a mentor for the new pilot program. The announcement made headlines. Ariana Blake breaks barriers, becomes chief pilot after heroic crisis response. The story spread across Canada and the US, inspiring young pilots and reminding everyone that skill and heart outweigh prejudice and doubt. Passengers I had never met reached out to me. Parents wrote letters thanking me for their children's safe flights. Fellow pilots, some of whom had doubted me before, now sought my guidance. And for the first time I felt the weight of every challenge I had endured, the years of being underestimated, the dismissals, the whispered doubts, and realized they had shaped me into someone capable of not just surviving, but leading in the face of impossible odds. At home that evening, I sat quietly by the window, watching the city lights twinkle. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a deep, quiet satisfaction. I thought of Grace, Marcus, and everyone trapped on that plane. I thought of Stephen, who now truly understood what it meant to trust and to rely on others. And I thought of myself, not as the person everyone told me I couldn't be, but as someone who had stepped into the fire, literally and figuratively, and come out stronger. The journey wasn't easy. It had been filled with fear, smoke, and chaos, but also with moments of bravery, empathy, and human connection. It reminded me that leadership wasn't about ego or title or proving someone wrong. Leadership was about standing tall when it mattered most, about taking responsibility for others, and about never letting doubt dictate your actions. And so, as I watched the last glow of the sunset fade into the night sky, I whispered to myself, no matter what they say, no matter the odds, no one can define what I am capable of, except me. I smiled, knowing this was just the beginning. Because the sky had no limits, and neither did I.